Hello and welcome to the Curated Beauty Podcast. I'm Jessica Christie, CEO of Beauty Culture Med Spa and the founder of the new functional and regenerative business, Cultured Wellness. From my start as a physician assistant to now not only being a practitioner but leading my own businesses, I've been on a unique journey through health, beauty, and entrepreneurship. Join us as we explore everything from skincare secrets to leadership lessons. Whether you're passionate about beauty or striving to balance life's challenges, this is your space to connect, learn, and shine. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Curated Beauty Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Christie, and today we have an incredible episode lined up for you. Joining us is Dr. Gretchen Frieling of G-Face MD. This is a powerhouse brand in the world of medical aesthetics. She takes branding to a whole new level and brings the experience of an incredible physician also along with that. Dr. Frieling has built an explosive brand known for its innovative approach to beauty and wellness and scaling teams, and expansion is the name of the game for her. She's such a huge inspiration to me and to others that are looking to do the same in this industry and beyond. Today, we're going to dive into her journey as well as mine as entrepreneurs, exploring both the unique and the common struggles that we face when we're scaling businesses in, again, any realm of business, but also specifically in this dynamic industry of medical aesthetics. Dr. Frieling and I really dive deep, but in an unscripted way. We kind of just turned on our microphones, and what came out was a lot of beauty, a lot of raw emotion, and what it takes, a lot of introspection, reflection on past mistakes, which is really what I use and she used for resilience in this really crazy jungle that we operate in. So we're going to talk about key challenges that we faced early on, how we overcame them. I'm just really excited to learn from her, and I'm excited to share these valuable insights with you, our listeners. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Frieling.
And I am Jessica Christie.
And we are here to have an unfiltered, unscripted, amazing conversation today.
I love that. It's like the craving for unfiltered in this industry in general is just so needed. People are going to love this.
Yeah. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk business strategy, growth, education, things that people want to know about. And they want to know the real deal, not, go to this conference because it just is the glitz and the glam and the awards and the sequence, and nobody cares.
That's something that actually, in my opinion, I've been trying to get conferences to see the beauty of and to see that that's what people want to show up for. Even the conferences that have that business track, the people that want to be the glitzy, glammy injectors, they're not going to those tracks. And that's truly the secret sauce of how to really become successful. The whole evolution of this idea of this podcast came to life because you and I were talking about a business concept. We were talking about EMR platforms, weighing the risks and the benefits of each and the pros and the cons. And we were just like, hey, get on the phone with each other, and super community over competition, which not a lot of people are about. So we're talking on the phone and we're like, man, we really are taking this in so many great directions and we need to record this. So that's why we're sitting down today.
Yeah. And there is so much to be said for truly picking up the phone and just connecting and talking to each other. It doesn't hurt to just try to call. If they don't answer, try again. But really diving into the business, understanding what's worked for other people, and just getting that information versus it's hard to filter everything out when you go through the companies. And I think that's another thing I wanted to talk about today is education that's industry-based versus not industry-based and what that means. Let's start with that, actually.
Yeah, what does that mean?
As an injector, when you were learning, and now, what recommendations and advice would you give to people when it comes to that?
I do think, looking back, I'm so glad that there were those big conferences. I think that it gave me a really clear direction of where I wanted to go, like what I wanted to be like, what I wanted to focus on. It gave me the awareness that I do need to put a heavy emphasis on education. But then as I would either go back to those same conferences thinking I was going to feel the same way I felt the first time, like that deer in headlights and all this glitz and glam, I would go back to the same conference thinking I was going to get so much out of it. And I was really left wanting more. And then as I got more and more experienced and kept going to these circles, as I watched people on stage talk about things that I had such a differing opinion from, I thought, oh my gosh, all these newbies that are where I was are taking this for Bible and thinking that this is how everyone should be doing things. And that was really alarming to me. And I was thinking, okay, who puts these people on platform? Do I want to be that person on the stage? Do I want to be in this kind of rat race? And really, that's what it's become. Now I feel like I reserve myself from those platforms. I actually try not to even really speak at them because I think that my education has become so much more personal. Like I've taken a training with you before when I wanted to learn ultrasound that stumbled into like, it didn't work out for me to be faculty for you at the time, but we can even talk about that. Like we build our community and we build our education off of maybe some higher ticket education opportunities that are a little bit more niche, and you choose who you align with to be able to gain your experience. That's something that I think a lot of people aren't ready for. They're not ready to make that huge investment because a training with you was a lot more expensive than going to one of these aesthetic conferences. But how much more value did I get? And how much did that really change my practice? A lot. It taught me ultrasound. What about you?
I'll go back. So I think I totally agree with you at the beginning. It's really great to just understand the landscape. You want to understand what you're dealing with. And it depends on, are you looking to own a practice or are you going to work in a practice, right? And what your goals are. But the way things have now changed is you're dealing with $1 billion industry that companies pay people to speak, period. And so where do we draw the line? And I think what's starting to take everything over is how can you really trust what you're hearing if they're sponsored and paid by a company? And it's happening all the time. And it's not that you don't trust them. It's just that what is their end game? Their end game is they want to create a relationship with you, right? But they want to sell their product. Everyone wants to sell their product. And so that's awesome. If you want to use Galderma, if you want to use Revance, wonderful. That education is limited because it can take you so far. And what I'm now really understanding is everyone wants me to speak for their company and this and that. And I'm like, hold on a second. I want to give my unfiltered opinion. And I also want to bring education back to my team that's unique, unfiltered, and unbiased. Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing. So when do you transition from getting that fundamental building blocks into now becoming more of an artist and not being jaded by the company? So that's the biggest thing. And I see it now so much where people that you wouldn't even think would align with the company are speaking for them. I don't understand this behavior.
Well, and it's crazy. We can see the misalignment, but again, these newbies can't. And it's really scary to think about the direction that it could take someone. And then before they know it, they're misaligned and having to go back to the drawing board. And I get it. I totally agree with you. Companies have an agenda. There's great products. There's promotion behind that. We promote ourselves and what we're all about. But I think if we can support conferences, like I was just speaking at a conference recently where they didn't allow the vendors to sit in on the meetings because they don't want the influence of different people that are speaking to be impacted or directed by those vendors and those strategic partnerships. Of course, there were a couple of sponsored talks, but it's very clear that this is what we're talking about, this product, and they have someone, of course, hopefully representing it that actually uses it. But to your point, there's people who are speaking for companies that will then get off the stage and tell you and I don't even use that product.
Yeah, or they'll go speak for a direct competitor. What is the end game here and what is everybody's selfish interest? Why are they doing what they're doing? And I think it's also interesting because there's CME accredited courses and there are non-CME accredited courses. And obviously CME has to be non-biased. You can't use brand names. And that's really great because they want you to continue your education. Yeah. It's unbiased. And I just think it's happening. It's so in your face right now, more so than even last year. So that was my first thing.
And the industry is booming so fast. Where there's a booming industry and there's opportunity and there's market share, the money will follow. And so it didn't used to be like that for you and I. Like you asked me when it kind of shifted. Like, I don't know what happened. Was it the chicken or the egg? Like my experience started to teach me like, oh, this is wrong. Or if the industry started to really stray and it started with good intentions, but then money came into it somewhere along the way. I think everyone knows who you are, but you're a very unique provider in the medical aesthetic space because you have a dermatopathology background, which is so unique and so valuable, and you know skin so well. Tell me about because I don't even know this. How did you enter onto the scene? And then where did you start speaking? And then where did this turn for you?
It turned recently, actually. I feel that I was sucked into kind of the dark black hole of conferences for a long time, and I was suffocating myself. But before that, I felt when I started my business, dermatopathology was so esoteric and unique. Nobody knew what it was in aesthetics. I'm the only one still that's pathology trained. And I finally was able to get out of my own way when I thought that was a downfall. You know, I wasn't the core dermatologist, the core plastic surgeon. I was unique. But how do I use that for educating others and to empower people and look at things a little bit differently? That's when I started to speak. And my first lectures were on the histopathology of injectables. I'm doing one, I've cut way down on conferences, but one on the biostimulation, the dermatopathology of biostimulation, going through the cells. You know, we talk about fibroblasts, we talk about extracellular matrix, hyaluronic acid, but do we really know what these things are? What is a macrophage? How do they all play a role? So getting down into the details at a cellular level. And that's how I started to speak. But then it became diluted. And I was speaking for people that I don't think cared about me. And then I'm not a kiss ass. And I'm not going to just suck up to these companies just to get on stage to speak and make $1,000 in 15 minutes. I don't care. And I started seeing how other people were being asked to speak on certain things. And I was like, you know, it's just not the way I want to be portrayed. And everybody's different and has different goals. But then there was a huge turning point for me. And the huge turning point was a couple of years ago when I looked into, it's a little bit of a side note, into selling. And it was too soon. I haven't sold my business yet. But at that point, I thought that me and my Instagram and me speaking on stage as a key opinion leader gave my business its value. And how wrong was I?
I think so many people think that. Like, they're like, if I'm famous, they're going to want to buy my business. They're like, please.
I speak all over the place. You're going to give me da-da-da-da. And they're like, no, it's about the numbers. And this huge light bulb went off in my head. What am I doing? I love to speak. I love to educate, but I need to spend time in my practice because I know what my end game is. And maybe that's not the same for everyone else. But I realized not only am I traveling a lot, I'm losing my time with my people. I'm not giving them the attention they need. My practices aren't growing how they would. And I'm not gaining from this experience anyway, all of these traveling experiences, because it's the same people every single time doing the same thing.
Yep.
It's wild.
I think also people can look at it like, I'm going to give you $1,000 to speak on stage for 15 minutes. But also when you look at flying in a Thursday, being there, like, okay, whatever, you get the value of listening to these other talks. That's valid if it's a good conference. But when you look at what that costs you to leave your practice, whether you're seeing patients or not, like truly being ingrained in your practice and running your goal detail on every goal that you have for that quarter or even the year, you're sacrificing so much that to me, it just stopped making sense. My best time is served building my team and focusing on the 2 or 3 priorities that I have at the moment. And I filter everything I do. I filter through these 3 things. Mine are building really good leaders for my team and developing them, anything to do with regenerative medicine right now, and also training. And so if it doesn't fall into one of those buckets, for me, it's a no automatically. And I had to make that because it's exciting. It's like they hear your name and they want you to speak for them, or they see that your social media following, or they see your expansion plans, or they like working with you, whatever it may be, and they want to attach their trailer to your train. I think that it's hard to say no, but once you do, isn't it contagious?
It's so contagious. And you're the first person who said no to me. And I was like, whoa.
Okay, let's talk about that.
It was so amazing that you, number one, felt comfortable saying that to me as a friend, and the way you said it to me. And I was like, you know, that's just really respectable. I love that she did that, as much as I'm going to miss her. But you took control of the situation.
And it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It was like, wow, this is going to be a really big stretch for me. I was missing out on something that I had to be at for my family. And I was like, you know what? As a female entrepreneur, her team is bigger and stronger than me. I'm sure that, first of all, I'm missing out on an amazing experience because you have such a cool thing going. For anyone who doesn't know, Face It is an amazing educational platform in so many ways, but this was the first time really that you were incorporating ultrasound and a cadaver with like live injections and all of those sorts of things and complication management. And ultrasound is a huge way of our future. If people don't have an ultrasound and they have a comprehensive practice, it's really a skill that I encourage people to bring on. It's an investment, but it's amazing. But huge side note, I felt it was so hard for me to say no. And you always worry, like, is someone not going to like me or whatever? But it's all about how you handle situations, and you're allowed to say no. And as long as you're doing it in a way that is respectful to another entrepreneur.
Yeah. And someone could say, well, you're sitting here bashing conferences, but you have your own. And I think that's why I created my own, is because there are no egos. There's no fashion show. There's only education, and the vendors there are vendors that I work with personally, that I believe in, and that I can speak for myself. It is very intimate, very small group setting, and you should leave there and feel comfortable and confident immediately integrating ultrasound and also having the tools to do that versus floundering around having education that you're not sure if it's biased or not. You don't really know where to go, but it doesn't mean that they both can't exist. It's just a different type of person is seeking out these two types of education. And that brought me to now creating an educational platform that we're developing where it's all in-house training and it's not with the companies. So we're developing PowerPoints on EasyGel and PRF and biostimulators and all of this that we do in-house. So we know that our GFACE MD injectors and non-clinical people are reproducible, scalable, manageable. All of our training is able to be tracked and we don't base it on a company, kind of the overarching theme.
Yeah, you're very creative by nature and you're going to put your own stamp of approval on a technique mixed with great technology. And I think that I really need to find another really good franchise model than McDonald's, but Ray Kroc, love McDonald's or hate it. I personally don't like it and I don't eat it, but that brand is wild because anywhere you go, whether you're in Paris or you're right down the road from me in Michigan or down the road from you somewhere on the East Coast, I could never keep track of where you are because you're popping all over and going to expand even more. Any McDonald's you go to, you walk in and it's the same brand. To that point, I think that that was something that really was pressed upon me in terms of expansion and scale. If every one of your injectors is doing a different technique, not to mention, everyone in the community without standard and without protocol and without evidence-based practice really behind what we're doing, then speaking just of our practices in terms of scalability, if the same patient's walking in and getting a different feel with different injectors, first of all, you have a vulnerability if that injector leaves and someone likes them, they don't like the other person. And second of all, it's just more congruent for a patient to feel really aligned or not aligned and decide to go somewhere else, which is also okay.
Yeah. It's a disservice for all your providers because you're working under a brand. So in that situation where people are doing completely different things, it's almost like you have sub-brands underneath a bigger brand. You're not controlling the situation. Your patients don't know what to expect with certain providers, and it's a disservice to your business as a whole. Yeah. And a complication management perspective, from SOP perspective, and from just a credentialing standpoint. We've all been talking about education and how do we have a national board exam or whatever it is, which is going to take forever to happen. But how can I do that internally right now? And that's why we decided to create this. It'll be structured where it's yearly, recredentialing, there's quizzes, there's updates. So everyone is aligned and everyone knows the most up-to-date information. They have research articles, all of that. And hopefully it's something I'll be able to share in the future.
I think you were talking about it at a conference. Okay, so again, talking about a conference that I went to where it was a little tiny small group. I think you said it where you were like, I put a paper up on my computer every Monday or whatever. Wasn't that you? And you were like, at some point, I want everyone to go in and take a peek. And I was like super convicted, like, wow, I don't read enough papers. Like, unless someone's like, here's a new paper that I'm seeing on social media, or like a company's giving me one, which again, could be totally biased. The art of learning how to read published papers and medical journals is something that I would bet that probably up to 90% of our injectors that are injecting in the country probably do not do. I have nothing to base that off of, but I don't think that it's happening.
Yeah, it was the American Aesthetic Review. I can't even remember what, but I trademarked the name. It's an actual company. And it was going to be a national journal club. So every month or every quarter, we'd get people together. It would be like $5 a month or something, or not, it'd be free. And we critically analyze a paper. How do you look at statistics? How do you see if there's bias? What company sponsored, et cetera, et cetera? What is the population size, the study size? Is this double-blinded? Is it not? Is it retrospective? Is it prospective? All of these things that you have to be able to understand in order to take anything meaningful away from it. And then, of course, I got sidetracked. And then I was like, what if I started a podcast where I just read these articles out loud? So when I'm driving, I want to listen to something.
Yeah.
But then there are articles or publications that have to be subscribed to and paid for. Could I get in trouble for that? And copyright stuff.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I put it on the back burner, but I do think it's something that's needed.
Actually, yes. I think that there's a huge need for that because that's what people want. They want the digestible ease of not having, first of all, how do you know what to look for? How would you even look for relevant aesthetic journals? And then how do you read them and know whether or not they're super biased? And then even just quickly taking a glance, is this something that is applicable to what I'm trying to learn and extrapolate from this? So we touched on the scaling part. And I think that we are two really good examples of how you can never look at the injector in the next town and see what success looks like to them and then compare yourself to that and say whether or not you're failing or succeeding. Tell me more about how you started with your practice and then where you are and where you're going.
Oh boy, I'm an unreasonable human.
You are.
I'm an unreasonable human. I know this now because I just took 3 personality tests. Myers-Briggs was one of them, but there's a couple other emotional intelligence ones. I can send them to you and I can tell people in the comments about this. But I learned a lot about myself and I also clarified a bunch of things that I'm completely unreasonable, but I'm also extraordinarily optimistic. So those 2 things together can create problems, but there are no limits to things that I think about, right? I think very big. But I also think in the short term of how can I get certain things done with a bigger goal in mind. And I would say that practice changed significantly in the past couple of years, even more significantly in the past year with growth of injectors that there's several different ways to bring injectors on, but I've realized bringing them on in smaller groups helps create camaraderie. It's easier for the business because you're training multiple people at one time versus scattering that. And so we brought in 5 injectors last year, and now we've transitioned into growing the administrative side and truly splitting the clinical and administrative or non-clinical side, splitting them with tasks, but working together has been the most explosive thing I've ever seen. And organizing the education and how the onboarding happens, I realized that my injectors weren't learning and offering treatments because I was the rate limiting step because I didn't have time to train them. And when I realized that, okay, this is the problem. Why is nobody doing Easy Gel? Why is nobody doing Kybella? Well, they didn't feel comfortable because they had no confidence because I really hadn't organized a training. So things like that have changed recently. But I mean, I started by myself. I started as I was working at 3 different labs. I've talked about this on multiple podcasts. And really, I think my transition of being a physician, which is very not business oriented, right? We're not taught business, to then going into business owner, to now transitioning to leader has been monumental for me. And just the mindset, the delegation, hiring people that are better than you.
I think you and I share the fact that we're visionary leaders, but did this come easy to you? Or was there a moment where you were fighting it and you're like, oh, this makes so much more sense. And I have a passion for the business side because it gets me to these goals of where you're going.
I fought it until I actually physically, emotionally, and mentally couldn't do it and I had to give it up. That's what it required for me. I didn't want control the whole way. But when I had my 3rd baby, I went through a ton of hormonal changes. I was switching over to this new platform called Rippling to do HR and onboarding and contracts and payroll. And Kaylee, my now director of operations, was remote at the time. She was still in college, but running the whole company from there. I actually could not do it. I didn't have the bandwidth. I was exhausted. I was trying to work without taking maternity leave, which doesn't exist for us, right? And I actually couldn't even open the window on my computer, and it could have been postpartum depression. Who knows what it was? I couldn't physically do it. And I had to relinquish control, and she took it over. And at that point, I realized, number one, she's going to run my companies very, very soon in person, absolutely incredible person. And I realized I was standing in the way of so many other things that were not only making me crazy, but prohibiting growth of the company. Yeah. And now I trust them more than I trust myself. I don't know what I'm doing a lot of time, and not that that's a way to do it either.
I think that is incredible. And I get to watch you a little bit more closely than maybe some people do. Like your mind works a million miles a minute. Like you're not only the person that is scaling all these operations and you have a conference and you're scaling your team and you have your list of roles and responsibilities, and how everyone intricately works together is just so expansive and so brilliant. But then you also are the person who has a swag for everything and like recognizes branding. And so the reality is it's just like when moms look at other moms and they're like, how do they do it? I am a failure. Like I could never be like that. It's empowering the team behind you. And that's something that I had to really get real about too. Is
tell me your story, how you did that too, because you did the same thing with the skincare. Yeah. Your VIP boxes you gave to everyone were beautiful.
Yeah. Yes. And that wasn't even my idea. That's the beauty is I was a PA in derm. I had my second baby. I had my babies really close together, super exhausted. And my husband and I, we had just regular jobs, making ends meet, had a really nice life. But I remember just going to work and showing up for who I was showing up for. I had expansive ideas. I always have. I've always been a reader and a visionary, but I didn't know it. And it just wasn't well received at all with where I was working, which is fine. And so that's on me. I made the decision to open up Beauty Culture, but it was really supposed to be like the tiniest little business, just me. And I brought this other esthetician with me. And then it did what a lot of aesthetic practices do, just blew up. It's very easy for aesthetic practices to grow, but it's not easy for them to scale. And it takes probably just always has to take a life experience where you have to really go back to the drawing board to truly appreciate the fact that you have to scale in order to really turn it back on. And I think there's stages, like you can either be in a planning stage where you're opening, or you can be in that growth stage, or you can turn off the growth to scale. I think you do both at once. You're a unicorn. And it is great. I think people probably underestimate a lot of what it takes to stand in this role. It was a lot easier to show up as the practitioner, but the reality was I probably would have eventually gone under because I wasn't doing the small things that really add up incrementally to a true brand. There's so many aesthetic practices popping up on every corner. What really sets you apart, and why are you in this business, and why do you show up every day, and really where are you going? People don't know where they're going. They want to make a good living. They hear from their friend that they can make X amount per month. And that's really sometimes the motivating factor. And that's so wrong. And I think both of us now that we have taken that time to scale, I think now we're like, wow, like you can see, first of all, that you can't do it on your own. And the more we call them unique abilities in our practice, like the more that I let people relish in their unique abilities and not worry about all the things, all the other stuff gets done. Plus they stand in their unique abilities and do even more, and they are creative. And then I get to let go of the reins and let things just happen. And it's crazy now walking in and seeing the projects that are created without me at all.
Yeah, it's so amazing. But I think the biggest hardship people have with scaling is, well, I'm the business owner, I'm the founder, I'm the primary revenue generator. How do I step back if I want to grow, but can't bring the money in, right? So there's this crazy, and I've had so many people reach out to me about, how did you step back? Which now I'm back in it again, right? So it's not like you have to just step back and never go back into it again.
Right.
But you have to just prepare yourself, right? So what's the worst that can happen? Well, okay, we don't generate enough revenue. Well, then I'll start seeing patients again. But it requires the leader or the business owner to step back to give space for the other injectors. It also requires handholding for a lot of patients on my end, right? To say, I want you to see these new providers. They're trained by me. They're incredible. Every patient's going to require a little bit of a handoff differently, but that's a big deal. And then also when it comes to scaling, I don't want to be the one that's grinding with the scaling, right? So you have to understand what you want. Everyone's like, well, how are you going to be in all these locations at one time? Well, that's not the goal. The goal is not for me to be in those locations. I have my team that we will continue to expand that will be there. Yeah. And it's really hard. There's no textbook for it, but I do truly believe, it starts with us as the business owner, but it then is run by the team.
You're writing the textbook and the playbook. So I certainly hope that you're going to have some sort of business roundtable as well, because that's the magic piece that people are missing in order to onboard 50 team members at once. When you're talking about expansion plans like you.
Yeah.
How many offices do you have now?
I have two. We're starting the third one here shortly. I've done a bunch of pop-ups. Right now we have the skincare in the Hamptons, which each one has taught me something different. Mm-hmm. And the third location is now teaching me to go back and re-look at my financials. So that's a huge thing that scaling provides, is you're fine-tuning everything. That's why we started talking, because I want to change over my medical record system. When you start with a medical record system, you're either paying monthly or you're paying per user. My mind was still on, okay, it was the fee per user that was 4 years ago. And I don't really have that many users.
It's no big deal. Yeah.
Wrong. It's now hundreds of dollars per user per month, that when I open my third location and have 10 new users, I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
And so I'm spending now over $2,000 a month on my medical record system that then's only going to continue to go. But if you don't stop and look into your business at a certain point, you'll never know these things. And scaling provides that. So it was that. And, your bookkeepers, accountants, they're instrumental in all of this as well, and having a really good team of that. So looking into that, I've also not really ever paid for advertising, which is wild to me. Mm-hmm. And my first office was in a storefront. So where I am now in Wellesley, it's in a basement of a building. There's no outdoor signage. There's nothing. And I'm very proud of that, that I was able to go based on social media. But now we are investing in Google, have an amazing team. If you're ever interested in anybody that wants to know this, between Google ads and then outsourcing phone systems that are 24 hours. And it's a team that answers calls, so your phones don't ring in office, with phone trees, and then also Facebook and Instagram ads. They all talk to each other. It's just going to blow it up. I'm very excited.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
7 years, right, for me to actually put money into that. Why? Because I want my team to get that attention and to get busy, not me.
Well, that's huge. Too, like if your face is the brand and people only call and say, I want to see Dr. Frieling, then you basically have failed your scalability or your EBITDA. And talk about like selling. It depends on, again, what success looks like, whether you want to be a legacy or you want to sell to a strategic buyer, a financial buyer, you want a venture capital, like whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter what someone's individual goals are. If you can create a brand, then that business will exist without us, which is actually a beautiful thing because it allows you to do more of the things that you love with the people that you love. And it gives you true freedom of time and relationships and purpose and money so that you can continue to scale. Yeah.
I mean, burnout is huge. I mean, I felt it more than ever January and February. My team knows. Even newer team members that didn't really know who I was on a personal level. I mean, I was barely functioning and you don't have a choice. I mean, you have to show up to be here. You have to run the business and it's really, really hard. So you have to catch yourself before it happens. And I know there are people, Julie Bass-Kaplan is one who talks a lot about her burnout in her early 40s. And you really want to try to prevent that.
What do you think the warning signs are of burnout?
Hating my job. I mean, my job, this is my business. Like I hated it. I didn't want to be here. I couldn't focus. I couldn't make decisions. So decision-making fatigue is another huge thing that as you scale, you should be making fewer, larger decisions versus the smaller ones because those smaller decisions are being made by your amazing team. They come to you maybe for reinforcement or for questions or whatnot, but I was still feeling in the weeds with decisions because my mind was foggy. I couldn't make those. So I felt like I was floundering. I kept telling myself, I just need to get to June. Because Kaylee, my director of ops, was going to be here in person in June and she was going to help me.
This is recent. She's finally here because I've heard her name. Like she sounds magical and amazing.
Yeah, I have my amazing team watching me over here. But I have a secret sauce when it comes to recruiting. Do you want to know what it is?
Yes. Oh my God. Who doesn't?
It's called babysitters.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not even kidding. Kaylee came into my home 4 years ago as a babysitter. I knew she was brilliant right away. And I said, do you want to start working in my company, social media, whatever it may be? And she has just accelerated. Not everyone has the same trajectory, but she just started taking on more and more responsibility, running payroll from Barcelona when she was studying abroad. And the rest is history, right? But every babysitter, they're laughing, every babysitter that comes in that is interested in an internship. So now we've developed a whole structure for an internship program. Anybody who's interested in some piece of whatever it is we're creating, soy or skin or whatnot, I interview them because one of my purposes in life is to create. And through all of this mind work, creating people, creating opportunities, creating passion within people that they didn't know they had, like what you found in yourself.
Yeah.
But babies.
That's so smart. The creating an internship program. that's beautiful to be able to offer something. Like think about when you come home from college in the summer or you're in high school or whatever, probably like coming home from college and to find a dream job of like working at a place that we've created these amazing environments with awesome supportive women. I think that would be a dream. I would have loved to do that versus some of the things that I did. And then capturing them from loving on your children. If you can tolerate our children,
I know
you can handle a lot. You should sign up for that. This would be a breeze.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for blind faithfulness. So when you're in a company for a long period of time, you just kind of say, okay, this is the rule. I'm going to assume it's the rule and I'm not going to ask questions. But younger, fresher minds ask questions. Yeah. So you can actually learn a lot from them as well.
We just recently really honed in on our hiring process and like creating an SOP on how to hire and how to recruit. And it minimizes the gray area for like, would this person fit? Like we're big on core values. We live, eat, breathe, die by them. And because they're who we all are at home too. And so we really make sure that it's ingrained in everything we do. It's clear expectation of who we are. I'm big on like, if you don't know your core values, make sure that you have them. And then this person also wondering whether or not they're going to be a good fit on your team and happy there, because it doesn't do us any good to have someone that's not happy or not aligned on our team. They're like, yes, this resonates. And it's this really clear soul connection from the beginning.
But I think there's a fine line. I'm curious how you deal with this. Well, a couple of questions here.
Go for it.
Friendship versus team members and having a group of women was challenging me at the beginning. How did you kind of deal with that?
Okay, well, first of all, I did hire some of my friends and that didn't go well. Like there were people that were at my house on Christmas or like came over to visit my babies when they were born, like really intricate friendships. And sadly, sometimes people that see you in a certain stage when you begin, and then as you continue to grow, it's very uncomfortable for other people. And the reality is it's none of my business how I make other people feel. It's my road for success, and to trot down it without worrying about how it affects other people, as long as I'm being respectful and kind. And so there's been massive betrayals that have happened in my office where people were like, whatever, I can't speak to why people do what they do, but where they've completely picked up and moved down the street and started their own businesses. Been people that I thought were really close friends who really had a lack of trust, and it all works out how it's supposed to. I don't hold anything against them, but I will say that I have really friendly boundaries with my team members. Even my COO, she's been with me since day one almost, in inception. Wow. And she's like, I could consider her family. But there's always been a level of intense professionalism where we just don't cross over those boundaries. And I think that could be a core value for people, is just that intense professionalism. But I've definitely made the mistake of getting too friendly with people before. And there's just certain things you don't talk about with your boss.
Yeah. And I think it makes everyone feel a little bit more comfortable when there's boundaries.
Like you're leading them. You're responsible for their livelihood, and they want that boundary too. It's like a parent-child. Like you're not best friends with your kids either.
Right. And I think at the beginning, when I started to grow and had just one or two employees, you almost feel like, and I wonder if you felt this way, and this was, 5-6 years ago now, you're not a leader at that point. You're a business owner trying to survive. Yeah. And I was like, I have to make them so happy. I don't want them to leave. Yes. Make them happy. I have to give them everything they want. I can't sacrifice anything. And geez Louise, is that wrong? For them too. They want boundaries and they want rules and they want regulations and all these things so they can perform in the best way. But as a business owner who's trying to figure it out, you don't know yet how to do all of these things. Now, I think a huge shift has been, there are no exceptions. I don't care how you came into aesthetics and what degree you have. You are still coming into a company with no aesthetic experience. And you don't get different pay because of your degree. It's a different field. It's a different animal here.
It is.
And you're incentivized a different way. As even a couple years ago, I was like, should there be exceptions because of this and that and their background? No. This is company policy and this is what we do.
Yep.
And man, it not only made everyone feel, I'm speaking for everyone. We talk to them with one-on-ones and everything. It's just, this is how it is. There's no special treatment. Yeah. The harder you work, the more money you would make. And that's how it's structured.
I had this happen to me. The clarity and the boundaries, even just taking full-time and part-time, for example. I used to not be as clear, and I used to negotiate with people more or let them come through the different tiers as they wanted to. And it actually really bit me for a good injector that I had. She was having like all these personal problems, kept needing to take more time off. I felt alone, first of all, because I knew all of these personal problems. And then it was almost an emotional thing for her going down and getting less money in terms of the amount of work that she's doing, the amount of patients she's seeing, the amount of revenue that she's generating. We still have to pay all the overhead. And now that it's so clear that this is what you're getting for full-time, this is what you're getting for part-time, it's built in such a way that you can make as much money as you want, but you also have to show up and you're taking some of the onus on yourself. And that was huge for me.
And it's so wild because I'm like, in retrospect, it's so easy just to make this is full, this is part, but it's not clear.
But back then, no, I get it. You're like, oh my gosh, no, let me work with you. And I was the same way. I was like, if I pay people the most and I give them the most freedom and I'm like so laissez-faire, like hands off, hey, how you doing? Here's a coffee, got you a Starbucks. It really blows up in your face because you really look like you're so desperate for people to like you versus like really wanting to build something together and empowering people to be leaders within your team.
Exactly. And now we have a base, and then we have service-based, commission-based incentives, and then we even have bonuses. So if you hit certain goals, then you're eligible for this bonus. And we have a whole calculation where it's all mathematical and you don't lie. And so it's made everyone feel so great.
It's transparency. People love transparency. And when you're transparent about, hey, this is the forecast, here's some examples of what other people are doing. Like, this is the reality of what it can look like for you. Here's your expectations. Here's what I'm going to do for you. This is my role as the leader. This is how I'm going to empower you. I've worked for doctors too that were like actually really jealous. So they'd want you to go do the work, but then they didn't want you to be like the face or too big or people to ask for you. And so really our job, I always tell people like one of my biggest jobs as a visionary leader is how much I work on myself and my own personal development, how I detach from all the negative of the things that have happened. And it's like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. We're moving on. What did I learn from that? Just like what you're saying, like all the things you've learned from every practice. Every single day is that opportunity for learning and to be a better visionary leader. And that's my job.
And I think obviously there's a purpose. We've learned more from our mistakes than our successes, right? And that's cliche, but it's true. But you can't just sit and bake in those things, right? You understand, you process them, you let them roll off whatever way. And I have things burned in my mind of when I found things out or when things happened to me, where I was sitting and what I did. And I'm paralyzed for however many hours looking at the wall, like, okay, this is happening for a reason. This is part of the story. At the end of the day, also how we react as leaders is observed and how we do things is observed. And so when people leave and your team is over here, like they're also flustered a little bit, like, why are they leaving? And I went through a phase where a lot of people were leaving and people would leave in groups because they were friends. A part of me was like, what is my team going to think? How am I going to look as a leader? Why do they leave? Is it my fault? But then having that introspection and being open with your team members of, I'm a very different person now than I was then. And I'm going to be different now than I am in 5 years. But how can I just embrace my team now and take care of them and reinforce and reassure them that it's part of the story and we're here together?
I love that.
But it is hard. They create relationships and people leave and come, but that's life.
It's so life. And I think I probably would have left the kind of leader I was too if I were some of my team members.
Oh my gosh, I say all the time. I'm looking at Rachel.
Or like just things that you let, not even you, like even things that you just allowed to go on within our practices. But also I look at the people that stand around me, like after the dust has settled from those things. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. Like when you're saying, like I knew where I was sitting and I knew how I felt. I stared at the wall, like totally been there multiple times. But you're right. First of all, you do learn to lean into it. You're like, okay, what am I going to learn from this? I'm excited about this. It's going to be okay. I've built a very sustainable brand. Like we're good. I think it was Alex Hormozy, and he was talking about all the lessons that you've learned and what you've built. Like if there was a price for all of that, would you pay the price of the experience? And like, think about those exact experiences that you're talking about, to relive those, to learn the lessons. Like I actually have chills because they were hard. They were painful. They were soul sucking. But the beauty is when you look at the people in your personal life and your professional life who are still there, like that's the rich stuff.
And I may have a little bit of a sick mind here, but I now really crave and enjoy the hard times, like the low times. I wonder why this month is lower than last year. Everything about this year has been completely unpredictable business-wise, but all wonderful. And it's been unpredictable because we are going through growth and we're going through changes, and you have to be able to keep your knees bent and be able to do those things. But I love the lows because I know it's just then even more of an extreme high. And those prices are bringing me to a place of extreme excitement. So it's highs and lows, highs and lows. So maybe that's why I'm sick.
Well, no, because it's the long game, like when you think about what does the long game look like to you today on this date in July 2024? It's July 1st, which is wild to me. I actually was like laying awake stressing out that the summer is like over, but it's not.
I feel like summer doesn't even start here till 4th of July weekend.
I know, especially for you guys, it's like magical there on 4th of July. But what does your end game look like? Your most successful story look like right now? And I'll answer it too.
Oh gosh. I mean, like at the end of the day?
Gosh, it's hard to predict the end of your career because I feel like we'll always work. I'll never not work. I don't think ever. But in terms of like our medical aesthetic spaces, the evolution of the greatest, highest place you could take GFace MD, what does it look like to you?
Multi-locations. I have this number of 20 in my head and I know I can make it happen. It's just a matter of how
so quickly. Inspiring.
You can do it too. I know you're on your way.
I'm trying to be like you.
You are in every way. We are very, very, very similar. I think the other thing too is when you scale and have goals that are that large, I've never asked for any financial help until recently. You can't get past a certain point. And when you look at the big picture with financial assistance, when you look at what you want to scale to, that money is actually very small money. But when you're in it, it's not because it's like, how am I going to do this? Whatever. So you have to understand how to pivot there. Do you go private equity route or capital? That's a lot more expensive. Or do you have a relationship with a private bank that you have to jump through more hoops? But you also have to learn how to ask for tenant improvement and things like that when you're scaling, because I didn't even learn that kind of stuff. 20 locations. I love the challenge of it. My skincare, I think, long-term is something that I haven't invested the time in recently because I'm building GFace MD. So that's something I really want to scale hugely, hopefully internationally. A lab to cultivate everything de novo, actually over in Paris. So that'll be...
Oh, that would be amazing.
And skincare is a totally different company. I mean, it's
hard.
Money. It's a bigger return on investment, bigger net profit, but the money that has to go into it from an advertising perspective is millions of dollars to get somewhere.
And the nurturing of the patient. I think that even just look at skincare reps versus injectable reps, like they got to be in there all the time, like nurturing that relationship, and they turn their back for 1 second and they're buying something. If you spent all this time really showing someone what's the best thing for their skin, it's a hard game. It's the best of the best. And I think that you have a huge leg up because of your background. It's amazing. Okay. I have in my vision, I want to scale to 3 locations total, but I want them to be in different states around the nation. You and I have talked about that because I've had that same piece of advice. You recommended to me, because I'm in Michigan, to maybe just scale 1 to work out all the kinks a little bit closer. So that's definitely on my radar. Selfishly, it's like I want to put my practices in places that I also want to spend my time, because I know the reality to get those up and off the ground and running the way that I see the brand look. I know that I need to spend time there. Like I know it needs my soul. And so I think about Florida, Texas, maybe like South Carolina, North Carolina, like those types of areas, because that southern warm feel just calls my name. But Michigan has my heart. It's always going to be home. I'll always have a home here. But I think that part of the journey is things that we think are possible today, we didn't 10 years ago. And I think that the same is true for the future. You just have to dream without any sort of boundaries. Like that's a place that boundaries do not belong. Dream without boundaries, dream without any sort of reservations about what could be, because the more that you manifest and the more that you live intentionally with what you want your life to look like, it actually does. And I've proven that through journals. So I don't know why we get in our own way sometimes. It's one foot in front of the other every day.
I agree. The other funny part about growth is that I then appreciate the small things so much more. So I was in the warehouse this morning at Sawyer breaking down boxes and putting away product, and people are like, you don't have to do that. I love doing it because I like to remember what it used to be like a lot of the time, because now, again, they're bigger. They involve more money. They involve more people. They involve everything. With my mind, I like bringing it back to simplicity of like, wow, this is where it started,
So
which is
cool.
really fun.
And what a gift to give to your children. You have 3 little ones. I have 2. I think it's so amazing that our kids are growing up watching people chase their dreams. And that, to me, is something else that just keeps me going.
And I so respected you when you did the whole homeschooling thing. And I was like, geez, that's not only is it amazing for them, the time you cram school into what, 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day?
Oh, not even. Yeah, they're so young. They don't even need it as much. My kids are like asking us why we're taking cash to the bank, why we're doing deposits. They're packaging up e-commerce with us. Like if people get e-commerce packages, there's a high likelihood that my children helped with that, and rolling the cartons into the post office. And some days they're like, I hate beauty culture.
I know, this is like actually their punishment for not doing things at home. It's like, okay, you have to come work now. You got to fill samples.
We even say like, would you rather go to school all day? And they're like, no. But they get to play and dream. And I feel like it's really consistent. I like things in my life to be really consistent. And I think that it's really consistent to allow them also to dream throughout the day. And sometimes my son will spend 3 hours watching how to draw super action figures, like from YouTube, like he's learning from this guy, a skill that I don't have. And we'll sit there and hold his attention, which was not being held in traditional school. So it's really so fun to watch them dream and to offer them opportunities. Like, I wonder what it would have been like for visionary leaders like us to just wonder all day, like, what are my unique abilities?
I love that. Okay, I have another question, because I know you love to read and you are always posting all these amazing books. You had one on peptide therapy that you posted recently. And I was like, oh, I want to read that.
As you can see, my books are color coded.
Yeah, I noticed. Really beautiful.
I was just putting them away. So I'm happy to send you any of them.
Yes. Reading is so great. And I think it's obviously hard to sit down and read a book because I start thinking about everything else I need to be doing. But if you can just read 1 or 2 pages a day, it's more than nothing.
So right now, all my books that I'm focused on are really wellness based because I'm building that business. And, you know, it's really interesting. Actually, it's a concept that you and I didn't touch on today. When you are the visionary and in the moments that you are stepping back from patient care, how do you stay relevant and know that you could step in and do any of the things that you're asking someone else to do? Like, is there a certain point where you no longer can do all of the things? Yeah. So like you and I can both still inject really well and do a lot of the aesthetic services really well, but hiring someone to take over that sector of my business, or of a brand new business, I should say, we built it from the ground up. That was a vulnerable position to step back into. And that's up to me to soothe those vulnerabilities, whether it's cross-training people, hiring more functional providers, being able to do certain services. The majority of my books right now are wellness-based, which is a huge passion of mine. And another great book that I read recently was Traction. I'm sure you're so familiar with.
It's like an encyclopedia. I mean, it's amazing, but it's
Literally.
Not just a read. I mean, This is a multiple, like I have to listen to it and read it and then go back and read it.
Yes. And you know what else I do? I don't know if you're the same. The perfectionist in me, which I know you also are, used to feel like I had to read a book from the front to the back. And now I pick it up. I read what serves me. If I feel intuitively like I've gotten what I need to, I just put it on my shelf or give it to someone. And I usually have written all over it. So that's not maybe the nicest thing, but this is the book sitting on my thing right now. The Book of Boundaries. A friend of mine told me about this when I was going through like one of my first hard times, and having boundaries is like thing number 1, right? What are you reading right now?
Right now, what am I reading? Probably 5 different books. Just, oh my gosh. It's the one on Oprah that I started reading, Create the Life You Want, or something like that. I forget, but it's good. But about boundaries, one of the reasons why I didn't go to a recent conference was because in order to get my pay determined, how much I was going to get paid for an ad board, I had to send over my CV. Have you done that before?
Yes, this recently also happened to me.
Yeah. Rubbed me so many ways that were not right. I was like, this is...
How did it make you feel?
In a way, I thought it made me feel good initially because I was like, okay, that's great. Like they want to see that I'm credentialed and they want to see that I am going to provide thoughtful information for this. However, then I was like, my degree so many years ago that wasn't in aesthetic medicine on this specific thing we're having an ad board on, it has no direct correlation to how much I should be paid. But then also, like, are you looking at my age, my sex? what else are you looking at? Because I know for a fact that men are paid differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just confused. I was taken aback and insulted. And at the end of the day, I was like, I'm not going to participate in this. And I don't know if my reaction was the correct reaction. I just know that I didn't like the way I felt initially because I didn't think it was transparent. I think that if you're going to spend 3 hours in an ad board with a bunch of people, those people that are chosen to do it should be chosen based on some certain criteria, and everyone should be paid the same.
I agree with you. I also look at it back from when I was in the hospital system. These higher ups that know nothing about me are deciding what I'm worth when I show up based off of a piece of paper. And I just think that we're so much more than that. And I don't know, like you said, should I feel that way? I think you did feel that way. So it says something. And I think that's an amazing boundary to step back and think that doesn't really feel good. And I don't know why, but I don't need to know why. I'm just not doing that. It's always a quote that I have. I'm not doing that.
Simple as that.
It's like my kids say it, I think. I think I must have gotten it from them, but it's so poignant, just straight shooter.
Love it.
Well, I loved this conversation that we got to have. And it was like double duty. Like I got to spend time with you. I got to see your face. This is what we need to do to have an uninterrupted hour conversation.
No.
Schedule a podcast.
People what else they want to hear if they enjoyed it, because I would love to do another one.
Yeah, that's
because this is
really good.
Unprepared for. I woke up this morning.
Yeah, we were like, let's do it. We didn't even have a time until 1 p.m.
Yeah.
This is the best kind of conversation. Like these are the things that happen behind closed doors of really amazing practices with successful women who really show up authentically, and people want transparency.
I love it.
Well, until next time, thank you for doing this with me. And that's a wrap on another enriching episode of the Curated Beauty Podcast. If today's conversations resonated with you, I urge you to share it with someone you believe could benefit from it. Let's spread the beauty, knowledge, and empowerment far and wide. For more in-depth resources, information about who we are, or if you're interested in becoming a patient or training directly with me or one of my team, visit our website at beautyculturespa.com. Don't forget to stay connected with us on Instagram for all the latest updates, behind the scenes, and beauty wisdom. Follow us at beautyculture.medspa and at B Cultured Wellness. That's the letter B, Cultured Wellness. Thank you for being with us today. Keep curating your beauty both inside and out. Until next time.